If you're a private company and the state asks you to publish or hand over a trade secret of yours, that's a good sign you are dealing with a totalitarian state and a very strong indication that you are better off if you leave that place for good. But what happens when that state is Germany and has the influence to bully 26 other countries to be equally insane as she is? Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now, there comes a time when the demands of the state are simply unacceptable. Even in the case of rather privileged relationships like Facebook's anti-freedom relationship with the most disdainful politician in recent European history, Angela Merkel. Anyway, coming from Tech Raptor, Merkel wants online platforms to reveal algorithms. And goes like this, quote, "Speaking at a conference in Munich earlier this week, German Chancellor Angela Merkel called on large internet platforms to disclose their algorithms to the public. Although she did not specify any platforms by name, it's likely that Google and Facebook are among the platforms she is referring to. At the conference, she stated, quote, "These algorithms, when they are not transparent, can lead to a distortion of our perception. They now narrow our breadth of information." She also stated that, quote, "The algorithms must be made public so citizens can be informed of what is influencing their behavior." Merkel is concerned with the increasing polarization of politics, which some have attributed to social media. The algorithms on many platforms tend to show people viewpoints that they already agree with and filter out viewpoints they disagree with. That is a development that we need to pay careful attention to, she stated, while stressing that it's essential to the democratic process that citizens are able to confront opposing ideas and opinions. The big internet platforms, via their algorithms, have become an eye of a needle which diverse media must pass through, she added. Merkel is not the first person to raise concerns about the issue. Earlier in the month, Caleb Gardner, former social media manager to President Barack Obama, gave a speech at Northwestern University which mentions this topic. Quote, "More likely than not, you get your news from Facebook. 44% of US adults get news on the site, and 61% of millennials get their news from Facebook. If that doesn't frighten you, you don't know enough about Facebook's algorithm," he said. If you have a parent who is a Trump supporter, they are seeing a completely different set of news items than you are. Back in May, Zuckerberg dismissed similar concerns and argued that social media is more diverse than traditional media. Facebook is actually, and social media in general, are the most diverse forms of media that are out there, he stated. In response to Merkel's speech, both Facebook and Google have spoken to the German newspaper Der Spiegel, saying that they already tell the public a lot about how their algorithms work. Currently, a group of German politicians from multiple parties are investigating the algorithms of many online platforms. Later this year, they will submit the results of their investigation to the EU's Digital Commissioner Günther Oettinger. Oettinger told Der Spiegel that, quote, "The Chancellor has touched on an important issue." Really? Really? Am I supposed to trust Merkel over myself when it comes to looking out for my interests on Facebook or even on YouTube? Well, how about no? One of the reasons nobody should take Merkel seriously on this issue is the fact that YouTube Deutschland is a complete mess. People in Germany and the United Kingdom lately, I might add, are objectively worse off than people in Italy or Eastern Europe when it comes to their access to information. The German state mandates so much censorship on YouTube that the place rivals Iran in many regards. Over 60% of the most popular videos on YouTube are blocked in Germany. By comparison, in most of Europe, that percentage is lower than 1%. So why should Google make its algorithms available at the request of such a censorious state? Well, the answer is that it shouldn't. Now, there is something to be said about Facebook's algorithms and Google's algorithms for that matter. But most certainly, I do not want to hear it from the former social media manager of President Barack Obama. If you have a parent who is a Trump supporter, they are seeing a completely different set of news items than you are, he said. Well, guess what? If you have a parent who is an idiot, or a leftist, same thing really, they are seeing a completely different set of news items too. But it's not what they see that is the problem, but rather what they do not see. Facebook's problem is not as much as it caters to one's news feed it caters one's news feed to one's preferences, but rather that it hides from one's news feed things that the management doesn't want you to see. I mean, it's no secret that Facebook routinely censors non-leftist news. I talked about that in this video. Facebook also has a plethora of thin-skinned admins. I mean, for instance, right now I am suspended again on my main Facebook account, this time for offending the sensibilities of trannies. Of all social media, Facebook is the worst by quite a wide margin. I mean, after all, SJWs constantly report this channel and Google consistently tells them to beat it. Meanwhile, 2 or 3 snowflakes whining on Facebook and I'm once again in Facebook jail. I mean, even big pages and much bigger accounts than mine aren't spared. It really is a mess. But the solution to this, in my opinion, is hardly political pressure by the German state or by the European Union. For starters, as I was saying, Germany is hardly credible in terms of transparency and hardly a credible advocate for freedom of expression. You don't get to pose as an advocate for transparency when you raid your citizens' homes for un-PC opinion and put them in star chambers and kangaroo courts. Sorry, it just doesn't work that way. More to the point. As much of an open source fan as I may be, I am not, nor will I ever be, part of the ideology of FOSS, that is free and open source software. No, not everything has to be free and open source. There is such thing as a trade secret, and trade secrets do matter, particularly in hyper-competitive fields like this one. Now, with that said, just because not everything has to be open source, it doesn't mean the consumers shouldn't exert due diligence. Use technology conservatively. If not for political discourse, I wouldn't be using Facebook at all, but since I have to, I make sure it's in its own sandbox and as far away as possible from the rest of the system. Forcing Facebook or Google to publicize their algorithms will only make them weaker, because after all, they'd give away their trade secrets and yet won't do any good to the consumers. I mean, after all, most consumers wouldn't be able to read them anyway, since an algorithm is not exactly something that anyone can willy-nilly read and especially understand. So forcing them to disclose it would at best be advantageous for the governments, which could then make specific legislation mandating various changes and thus enforcing censorship through private corporations. There is a name for such a system: fascism. Now, I don't know about you, but as progressive as fascism may be, and yes, fascism is progressive, I'm not a fan of it. Now, I heard this argument several times. In fact, it appears in the comment section of this article too. The argument goes basically like this: if the EU wants to help curb the censorship and bias of Facebook or Google or whatever, then the EU should fund networks that compete with these American products. Surely there are people smart enough in Europe that could design such products. And some versions of this argument may or may not include conspiracy talking points, but that's essentially the gist of it. Now, first of all, this is a very bad idea in and of itself. I mean, if you want to make sure something is awful, just put the government in charge of it. That's why I want the government, for instance, to run prisons, by the way. As awful as Facebook might be, and it really is, a government-run social media platform would be billions of orders of magnitude worse. The largest failures of the free market are still huge orders of magnitude superior to the biggest success stories of government programs. Secondly, a platform as successful as Facebook, or VKontakte for that matter, simply cannot emerge from the European Union or EU-influenced countries. It's just not going to happen, ever, at all. Now, why is that? Well, because most of the EU doesn't have a clear-cut First Amendment. Freedom of expression is negotiable in the European Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, and for as long as things stay that way, there can be no EU-based company and no product that can even begin to be comparable with Facebook or with Twitter or with Google. The complete lack of laws on speech is a mandatory condition for such thriving business to emerge, and it's also not the only condition. Not having insanely idiotic regulations on online businesses is another mandatory condition. The only reason Amazon can survive on the EU market is because it is already big enough to incur the unreasonable burden imposed on it by the EU SSR. But an Amazon-like startup in a country part of the European Economic Area? That's not going to happen. It's just too expensive, both time-wise and money-wise, just to work through the insane amount of regulations. So, bottom line. If the EU is willing to help with this one, there are a few things that it can actually do. First of all, dismantle the European Court of Justice that does all those insane competition law cases. Second, abolish the entirety of the body of law generated by that court since Constant and Grunding versus the Commission in 1966 and up until present day. Third, drop all the regulations, report, recommendations, and other tools by the Commission, the European Parliament, and all associated institutions that have anything whatsoever to do with speech, especially the part regarding the so-called press freedom, which in reality it's the EU's push to force national media to lie to its own public about race, sexuality, ethnicity, and language. This actually warrants a separate video, but anyway. And finally, fourth, get the EU out of the internet. For good. There is not a single action in the history of the European Union that concerned tech companies or the internet that was good for the consumers. None whatsoever. All have been either extremely evil or an excuse for petty bureaucrats to flex their muscles and profess their disdainful anti-Americanism. I would say enough with that nonsense. Now basically, get these four elements done and the EU would have indeed provided a tremendous amount of help to getting an EU-based competitor against Facebook and Google. Now, of course, the EU is unwilling to do any of these, and as a result, there will never be an EU-based company that could reasonably compete with Facebook or Google. I mean, heck, the EU-based entrepreneurs are flying to the United States to fund their startups and they register them there. Just a few days ago, I supervised another entrepreneur with a brilliant idea that is already making money to go to the United States and develop it further there. It's simple. The EU is cancer when it comes to these things. So Merkel and Mr. Nobody from the EU's Digital Commissioner office can talk as much as they want because they don't matter. Merkel will be gone in 1 year, the Digital Commissioner will also be gone in 2 years and a half, but Facebook will still be there most likely. What will take Facebook down will be the market with a superior product, or even an inferior product that has the attributes that people want. I mean, Reddit, for instance, is the biggest evidence of extremely inferior product that still holds high in the market's preferences despite its obvious qualitative inferiority. The fact that it's perceived to be less censorious than the competition is apparently good enough. Twitter these days is suffering enormously, in part because of its censorship, so something will take its place, whether it will be Minds.com or GAB.ai, I have no idea. That's how things work, and that's how they are supposed to work. Everything else, especially what European politicians say, is simply background noise. And that's a best case scenario. That's all I had to say. Thanks for watching.